is enormous. The necessity to have multiple officers contact these individuals, because you have one guy out there, and you might have three early release AB 109 characters in a car. Well, that is really an officer safety problem, and a lot of these things weren't looked at. They were just kind of glossed over, but they were predictable and they were preventable, and none of that happened, unfortunately. And now we're dealing with the.
Now you're dealing with it. And I just want to say real quick, you brought in some people that actually have a very strong background, I know, in running jails and prisons.
Yes.
To help.
And they're doing a fantastic job. But even yesterday, I had a long conversation with Under Sheriff Tortoriki, and we're having issues over there. We're having to make decisions, and I'm really opposed to releasing anyone who has even the slightest danger potential. But we have to make really very serious decisions on a daily basis about who are we going to release, as opposed to having somebody sleeping on the floor. And one of the problems that brought all this about was a case that was filed against the Department of Corrections, State of California, for overcrowding and for prison conditions that resulted in enormous fines being levied against the prison system. They had to clear out the prisons, but it's not like the criminals disappear. So they're moved over to a jail, and I expect a lot of 1983 civil rights lawsuits coming down the pike, and they have actually, not so much here, but they have in other places, because of the inability to adjust that quickly.
Sure. I mean, so the same problems that visited the prisons are going to now, if they aren't already, visit the jails, because the jails weren't built to house these numbers that you're looking at.
Actually, the problems are worse, because in the end, when you build a prison, you build it for a purpose, for long-term housing of really high-level dangerous criminals. When you build a jail, it's a little bit different. It's for maximum of a year. The security levels we've had to increase. We've had to spend money on additional officers, on additional security. And I'm not going to get into all of that because I don't want the crooks to know. But the bottom line is that there's a whole series of unintended consequences that occur, and those unintended consequences, frankly, were just not addressed. They weren't addressed in this realignment idea in the AB 109 bill.
Well, I know there is a feasibility study underway that's going to look at expanding the jail, and so we'll have to get back to this subject again.
I'm happy to do so, and I'll bring in a couple of guys. Talk about it.
Okay, let's switch now over to back to, I should say, your fight on crime. How's that going? What can you tell us?
I think it's going really well. The officers are out there on the street. I think anybody would realize that there's a lot more radio cars out on the street, that they're being proactive about taking on suspects, people who are reasonably easy to identify. But these officers are not staying in the stations. I mean, even when I'm driving around, I'm constantly seeing radio cars out on the street, which puts a big smile on my face, because there's an old saying in law enforcement: you can't identify what's abnormal until you know what's normal, and you can't know what's normal unless you're out on the street.
Right.
So if you're patrolling these neighborhoods and you're not on you're off the highway and you're cruising around and making stops and talking to people and looking around, if you see something different, that's going to catch your attention. But if you're sitting in a station waiting for a call, then you don't have a prayer of knowing what's abnormal, because you don't know what's normal. So they are out there. They're doing proactive work. I take my hats off to them. I wish I could reward them a little bit better than just, I talk to them, I thank them, but they need more money. That's a constant mantra of mine. 7 years without a raise. I have a really good crew. Some people left and we replaced them with officers who are really shining stars. But there's a lot of competition out there when we're paying, substantially less than other law enforcement agencies for a risk that could mean your life. That's something that people have to look at. I mean, it's just reasonable to look at, and I don't want to lose these officers, and I would ask the public that's out there listening to please support me in attempting to increase the pay of your law enforcement officers.
So, on that note, one of the comments that was made actually by one of the individuals running for sheriff, assuming there's a recall, is that under your administration, crime is up. Can you address that?
Well, apart from AB 109, and apart from the fact that I have an absolute standing order that all crime is to be reported, and I'm going to take a second to talk about that, because when I worked as a deputy, there were deputies out there that would spend 2 hours on kissing off a report that would take 15 minutes to write. Oh, this burglary, you don't have insurance, or the amount's below your insurance deductible, so why even bother reporting, et cetera, et cetera. That's unacceptable, because I need to know what's going on, and the only way I can know what's going on is by looking at RIMS and looking at the reports that are being taken and seeing patterns or seeing what type of crime is happening so that I can direct the resources appropriately. So this idea that you could go out to a call or not go out at all in some certain circumstances, but go out to a call and try to talk a citizen out of making a report is unacceptable. So you have to take that into account. You have to take AB 109 into account, and then but the biggest factor that you have to take into account are the arrest statistics, which is something that particular individual was asked about, and he said, well, I don't have those statistics with me. And there was a couple people who actually really cornered him. I mean, they built a box around him, and then in the end they put a lid on him, and that was good. I was happy to hear it, because they kept asking him, well, how do arrests, if you have an arrest, obviously it's going to increase the crime statistics.
Sure. So I think the point being made, or the point that you're making, is that yes, if you file reports, that's going to show that there's an increase in crime because you're filing a report about a crime. If you don't file reports because you find a way around that, then it shows less crime.
Correct.
But in fact, the statistics of the actual arrests and the actual crimes are the ones that you can look at to know how well are you doing.
Sure. So that's exactly what I'm saying.
So do you have some of those statistics available?
Well, let's start with I instituted a program where we visit 290 registrants. A 290 registrant is a sex registrant. I personally feel that they, sexual predators, present an enormous risk to the public and to our children, to everyone. So they need to be addressed. So we go out on a regular basis and we perform these sweeps and we visit them. And through those visits, some of them are out of compliance and they go to jail, and rightfully so. So in 2010, the sum total of sex registrant arrests was one. There was one person caught off base who was a 290 registrant.
Now, 2010 is the last year of the former administration.
That's correct.
Okay, last full year. Okay.
And then, in comparison, in 2012, we had 12 sex registrants go to jail for violation. Now, that's a direct result of our detectives and our gang task force, which are also involved in our 290 sweeps, and then our patrol deputies and corrections who transports these people. I mean, it's a joint effort between all the different aspects of our department. We go out there, we visit these guys. Some of them are leading okay lives. They're not, violating the law, but some of them are. And in 2010, there was one arrested, 290 registrant arrested. In 2012, there was a dozen. Now, when you talk about that's the individual running for sheriff, he was using percentages. Well, if I wanted to use percentage, I could just tell the people out here in the public, well, that's a 1,200% increase, which sounds, wow, that guy's really knocking them dead. But I'll just give you the straight numbers, and then you can take them and make what you want of them.
The point of this is not to spin, and you can, statistics are easy to do that with, but really what we're looking for is results.
Right. Now let's move on to elder abuse, another crime that I find abhorrent and bothers me personally and professionally. and they're difficult crimes to prosecute, or not to prosecute, but to investigate. To prosecute also, I guess, if there's a good investigation done, it shouldn't be that difficult to prosecute, but the investigation is difficult because oftentimes, elderly people are alone. The people, the abusers themselves are oftentimes family members or people who are their caretakers, and they develop, relationship, and they don't want to get them in trouble, or they feel that they'll be completely alone without these individuals. So you have, in many cases, a reluctant victim, and that's always difficult to prosecute. And most of these cases are prosecuted through our detectives. So in 2010, there was a sum total of 8 elder abuse arrests made. In 2012, there were 18 elder abuse cases where there was an arrest made for elder abuse. So, you start comparing those, and and they all add up, because these, I have literally all these papers in front of me, and I'm just going to go through some of these, and this is, certainly I make this available to anyone who wants to look at it, because this tells us the true story about these statistics that are getting thrown out there, and setting aside the AB 109 and setting aside the mandatory reporting that I have instituted since I took office. These numbers speak for themselves, because each one of these numbers, when you compare them to the previous administration, well, if you have 18 people versus 8 arrested, well, there's eight more, quote-unquote crimes that were committed, right? Yeah, but we have people in handcuffs for those crimes. And that's an important distinction that must be made if you're going to be fair about the presentation.
Well, if you're just going to be honest about it.
Well, or just honest. Yeah. That's a good word to use. So let's move on to some drug crimes. Okay, cultivation arrests. Now, we've talked a lot about marijuana, and, cultivation now, again, we're talking about these cases that you see. Some of them are in the newspaper, some of them are not. But the cultivation arrests in 2010, there were 39 cultivation arrests made by the Lake County Sheriff's Office. In 2012, there were 79 cultivation arrests made by the Lake County Sheriff's Office. Now, again, I could start working the math and presenting, X amount of 100% increase, but no, I'll just give you the numbers and make of them what you want. Okay.
So, caller, I know you're waiting, so if you don't mind holding on, go ahead and hold on. I'll try to get to you, but we're going to let the sheriff report out on some statistics before I do that. Okay, go ahead. So
and I'll make this brief, but again, these numbers are available to anybody who wants them. They can look at them, and they were available, by the way, to Brian Martin before he went on the show, where he started lauding all this increase in crime stuff. If you're going to be prepared and you're going to make these arguments, then be prepared and make the arguments.
Well, unfortunately, and he's in campaign mode. He's campaigning, so he's going to do his best to characterize things in his favor.
That's dishonest.
But what we're looking for here is really honesty. What's really happening on the street? Am I safer than I was? Am I safe? Period. So I know you're going to get to meth. I'm
going to jump right to meth. Now, these numbers are substantial, but let's just go straight to the sales cases, because the sales cases involve the narcotics division setting up the sale. Right. Generally people don't walk around doing hand-to-hand sales.
A lot of work involved
on Main Street. There is a lot of work involved. There's talking to confidential informants. Just an enormous amount of work, and I've done that work myself, and I know how difficult it is. It doesn't come easy. So in 2010. For sales of methamphetamine, there were 4 sales cases made compare that to 2012, where there were 31 methamphetamine sales cases. Now, once again, I could go into the thousands, percentage over
increase.
and make those summary statements and go into campaign mode myself. But frankly, I'm not going to get distracted, as I've said over and over again, by this recall. If the people want me to stay there and want me to continue to do what I'm doing, then that's exactly what I'm going to do. And if they don't, then I'm going to pack my valise and go. And it's the people's will. If 50% plus one voter says, Rivero, we don't like you, or we don't like the way you look, or we don't like the way you act, or we don't like the way you perform, and they can convince the public of that, and the public is on board, then I get to go home. If not, then I'm going to continue to pursue the criminals. It's just that simple.
So, caller, you're on the air.
Part of the public is perfectly happy with you going after the criminals. Again, I would. I was remiss in not, at the Board of Supervisors, thanking Denise Rushing and Anthony Farrington for pulling that over onto the talk agenda. And thank you for showing up with Captain Aceto.
Yeah.
You once again, my respect for you has maintained, if not gone up. You show up, you answer the questions. You know how I feel about helicopter flights. But thank you for keeping the powder out of my hood.
Well, and, I appreciate you being there. Also, I understand. I really do. I want to make. I reckon I put your face together with the phone calls now during that meeting, actually, which was good. It's always nice to have a face to go along with the voice. But I want you to understand that the differentiating between the legitimate medical marijuana and the profiteering, cartel, organized crime individuals is something that I spend a lot of time on, and I reflect on it, and I think about it.
Well, I do have to say this, of the marijuana arrest, I didn't know any of the people.
Yeah. Well, and you know what?
It was outward bound.
That's because a lot of them are from out of state and from out of country. Actually, they're coming here to bring something to the families and the people of this county that should not be bestowed upon them, and it's my job to make sure that doesn't happen. Concerning the overflights, by the way, the officer that does those overflights, he's very conscious about the altitudes, and we can spot these things from way up in the air. I mean, believe you me, we don't have to go down and there was one individual, I believe it was Ron Green, who was saying that we're buzzing over people at 100 feet or something like that. That's absurd. Now there are other helicopters like Reach and CalStar and Cal Fire and.
So are they doing maneuvers from the helicopter, or is the helicopter just reconnaissance, and then they go in with vehicles and dogs?
Generally, the helicopters are reconnaissance, and then if the place is too remote for us to enter by vehicle or on foot, then we stavo in and fly in the officers, and they go down on ropes, a very dangerous operation, and go in, eradicate, arrest, and we move on to the next one.
All right.
Get them big boys out in the woods.
I'm working on it. And by the way, to the extent that I know that a lot of these big marijuana growers, and I know this for a fact, are involved in this recall, it's not going to deter me or dissuade me by any stretch of the imagination. I said this at the Board of Supervisors meeting, and there was some talk about the recall and the marijuana growers and et cetera, et cetera. That will not work.
I don't think they're going to get the signatures.
Well, whether they do or not, and whether they take me out of office or not, is irrelevant. It's not going to change my operation one bit. I am going to continue to aggressively pursue these criminals, and that's the end of that story, irrespective of what they do. And by the way, I said this at the Board of Supervisors meeting, and it was my decision, and my decision alone, to bring in the DEA to help us. So if you have an issue with that, that's an issue that you can take up with me at 295-6289.
Well, I thought you resolved quite a bit of them, and I look forward to at least 2 more years of you continuing to do what you're doing.
Well, thank you, sir, and I appreciate your input. I really do. I'm grateful for the ability to talk to you.
Thanks for the call. Okay. All right. Do we have another caller? We do. Caller, are you? No. Okay. We're down to the last 2 minutes of the show. That's the signal that our board operator extraordinaire is giving us. So we've got 2 minutes left for you to offer closing remarks.
Well, first of all, happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there, and be a father. You know, honestly, take care of your kids. It's important. You know, the example that you set now is the one that they're going to follow when they're adults, and it's, you know, being a mother is a huge job. It's tough, and being a father is a tough job, and, you know, I have to do a fair bit of balancing there, and, you know, I understand. I fall down on occasion. I come home too late. Or
are you human?
I am human, but you know, I mean, but I have to, you know, I have a humongous responsibility here to the people, and part of that responsibility is to keep the county safe for my own family.
Sure, of course.
So, you know, there's a benefit there, and you know, my boy understands, and, you know, my kids are reasonable.
Well, happy Father's Day to you, Frank.
Thank you.
Thank you for your service.
And, you know, in closing, I just want to let the people know that I understand what public service is about. I understand that I do work for you. I'm available to talk to you if you so desire. Please don't hesitate. You know, because of the influx of calls that have grown over the last few months with this recall, sometimes it's difficult. You know, I used to be able to just pick up the phone and talk to people. Now I have to, you know, I'm a week behind on calling people. You know, I take messages, and I try to keep up. If I miss you, call again, please. And just know that I'm doing the best I can to keep you safe.
Thank you for listening in, all of you out there in Lake County. Join us in 2 weeks for Straight Talk with the Sheriff. This is your host, Olga Martin Steele, saying goodbye.